from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on Ag Day, trade officials are headed to China and sorghum growers are hopeful dumping accusations will end. In agribusiness, the impact of E15.
Well, I think it's a slow piece. It's a long-term piece.
What's more important, animal welfare or children's education? And fighting to save bees in Louisiana.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The ag industry and trade partners are watching in earnest as the administration plans a trip across the Pacific to talk trade with Chinese officials. According to President Trump, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin will head to China within the next few days for negotiations on trade issues between the two countries. The president saying this week, quote, "We have a very good chance of making a deal." He noted that if an agreement is not reached, proposed tariffs on a host of Chinese goods would take effect as planned. Now, Mnuchin will travel with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow, and White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro. Sorghum leaders say the announcement is promising. The trade tiff with China already impacting sorghum prices and sales. Bids for sorghum in the Gulf of Mexico have nearly disappeared since news of the anti-dumping deposit was announced last week. Tyne Morgan joins us now with more.
As a quarter of the country's sorghum sits planted and in the ground, China is ramping up its accusations. The latest move, a 178% tariff on U.S. sorghum.
It's a 178% tariff. It pretty well totally stopped everything immediately.
National Sorghum Producer CEO Tim Lust says the announcement acted as a wall for ships on a trek to China.
There was a 24-hour notice given for entry into China. So it wasn't a 24-hour notice of ships being loaded in the United States. It was a 24-hour notice of ships entering into the harbors in China.
Reuters reporting last week as soon as the news hit, several ships loaded with sorghum turned around at sea.
Over the last few days, we've been able to find homes for a lot of that sorghum that was on the water. Certainly Spain and Saudi Arabia and several other countries have stepped up and made large purchases of sorghum.
Some of that grain may need to be absorbed domestically, likely in the U.S. feed supply. Lust says the sorghum industry is also working furiously to get a sorghum oil pathway approved, allowing it to be used for biodiesel.
While that pathway has been through a preliminary rule, it's not been made final. So certainly part of the discussions we've had is with EPA, and that next step becomes very important because there are ethanol plants that simply won't buy sorghum today because they're not allowed to sell their sorghum oil into biodiesel.
At the same time, Lust says National Sorghum Producers is fully cooperating with China's ongoing anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigation.
I think the challenge for us is we did submit over 2,000 pages of documentation about the relationship that we have. It's a very win-win relationship with our customers in China.
NSP is adamant that the U.S. is not dumping sorghum into China, but as China's accusations stew, he says it's consuming the sorghum industry right now.
We've done a tremendous amount, really, of playing defense and just dealing with the cards that were dealt to us. There's an extensive process that's laid out as a part of these cases, and it takes a lot of hours and a lot of resources.
Lust says it's not just U.S. sorghum wanting to see the case resolved.
We have a set of customers that are asking these same questions right now of how are they going to get the grain they need, and what is it going to do to their cost of production, and what's it going to do to food costs in China.
As President Trump's top economic advisors head to China next week, Lust understands politics may be the solution.
Certainly, as negotiations get going between our two countries, there is an opportunity for us to be able to be removed as a part of that. I think that is a goal and an ask of certainly our organization, but I think of our customers in China as well.
The weight of China is trickling over to farmers. As prices fall, some producers questioning their decision to plant sorghum this year. But Lust says trying to outguess trade situations is never a safe bet.
There's a lot of people working day and night to make sure that their opportunities to grow a profitable crop continue, and want them to know that there have been hiccups before. That's not the first challenge this industry or agriculture's ever had, and we've made it through those, and we'll make it through this one again.
Reporting for Ag Day, I'm Tyne Morgan.
All right, thanks, Tyne. Lust telling Ag Day that even though the Chinese anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigation was launched earlier this year, there are still several steps to take before the case reaches the finish line. There's no timeline in place for that. Also on the trade front, NAFTA negotiators continuing to work in Washington. The push is on to get an agreement, at least in principle, by early May. That's next week, by the way. Ministerial level meetings earlier in the week were largely focused on automotive rules of origin. Wednesday's talks turned toward a number of other significant issues that still need to be resolved. Now, according to participants, these high-level talks are expected to continue over the next couple of days. Mexico trade officials putting the chance of reaching a deal in the next week or so at 75%. Also in Washington, new data from EPA showing refinery waivers have effectively lowered the volumetric obligations by some 1.6 billion gallons. Now, this comes from the Renewable Fuels Association's analysis of EPA data. Reports recently revealed the EPA was granting renewable fuel blending waivers for what it calls small refineries. The EPA has not disclosed the exact number of exemptions granted or the volume of required renewable fuel blending that was waived. Now, farmers in the Corn Belt say they're nervous about the administration's support of the RFS.
Well, it's gutting the intent of the RFS when we grant waivers. There's been well over 1 billion gallons worth of waivers applied for, now that they've not all been granted yet. But we struggle in the ethanol industry and farmers with E15 and stuff. We're counting tens of millions and at the most hundreds of millions of gallons of sales as a big win. So when the EPA grants over 1 billion gallons of waivers, it puts a huge dent in the effort that we have to try and continue to raise the level of ethanol being used, and instead of lowering it as that waiver would do.
Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue answering his own questions about the RFS and waivers on Tuesday during a hearing with the Senate Ag Committee. He pointedly criticized EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt for the RFS waivers, telling the committee that the waivers were worth more than 1 billion gallons of ethanol and had, in effect, undermined the RFS.
What will you do specifically to ensure that the EPA is not deliberately circumventing the RFS?
Well, Senator, you know statutorily I don't have any kind of hammer. What I do have is the power of persuasion with the administrator and the president to make sure that they are aware that we are aware, and we had to dig pretty deeply to get the number of gallons that have been waived this year, and with the president and his team, let them understand how the instructions that he was given last fall over maintaining the RVO obligation at 15 billion gallons has essentially been circumvented by the waivers.
EPA Administrator Pruitt telling farm broadcasters this week the so-called hardship waivers are not granted subjectively. He says even if a refinery is part of a large company, waivers are considered plant by plant based on the capacity of the individual facility. Well, later today, Administrator Pruitt is likely to get a chance to answer these questions. Once again, he's scheduled for 2 separate committee hearings in the House of Representatives Thursday. While the fertilizer builds up in Washington, plants are often growing in the South. Mike Hoffman has details in today's crop comments.
Good morning, Clinton. Southern growers are often running with 2018 crops. Trey Dunaway of Hawkinsville, Georgia sent us this picture of corn via Twitter. He says they planted this field on February 23rd. So far conditions are good, but growth has been slow due to the cool weather. However, his days are warming up now. Temperatures are forecast to be in the low to mid 80s over the next 10 days. Now taking a look at the wind speed forecast, kind of breezy across the west central and northern plain states today. You can see that's the windiest area across the country. That moves southward into the panhandle of Texas on up into Minnesota by later today. Heading into the day tomorrow, you can follow that front southward into western Texas, parts of New Mexico, and a little bit breezy back into Minnesota with another system coming in from the north. We'll have your forecast coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk ethanol and the potential impact of E15 in the marketplace. Later in Drovers TV, how important is the children's education? You might be surprised how it compares to animal welfare. Plus, bee health is a buzzworthy topic the last few years. We're off to Louisiana, where they're working to step up the fight against mites. That story today on In the Country.
Ketchup. With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor corn herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
Mark Feit, International Agribusiness Group, our guest here at the Agribusiness Desk today. Mark, as we look at the overall ethanol picture in E15, there's a lot of talk that, and it looks like we may be moving toward that E15 standard out there at the gasoline pump. What does that mean at the farm gate?
Well, I think it's a slow piece. It's a long-term piece.
Okay.
And just about everything we see continues to support the production we have today. It's even possible 2 years out that this could support additional capacity, and we may see a little bit of expansion. The president said we've got a good shot at E15. The E15, eliminating the vapor restriction for the summer, is the key priority for the ethanol producers. So any concessions, any compromise will get that E15 done. We think it's a high probability that by the end of the summer that the E15 is opened up for 12 months.
There are roadblocks in the way, including at the stations themselves, having the facilities and the equipment to be able to move to E15, right?
There is, and there's a limited number of pumps that we have today. But what this does, going to 12 months, now it makes it economic to add those pumps. Okay. Think about a 50-cent discount to ethanol to unleaded today, and that's 2.5 cents at the pump. Right. If you're E15 versus E10. So 2.5 cents on a competitor standpoint is a big deal.
Yeah, starts to add up. Yep. As you look overall at the ethanol market, are you bullish? Are you positive that long term?
I am. I think the Chinese program to go to 10% by 2020, that's probably optimistic. They don't get there by then, but ultimately they're going to see a 10% blend. We believe that. Ethanol is a cheap fuel. That's positive, and it's a very potent oxygenate. So that first 2.5–3% is a really cheap piece of fuel.
Okay, well, it's one corner of the market, one piece of the bigger puzzle for all of these grains and the way that we use them. Appreciate you being here and helping us sort through it. We'll be back with more AgDay in just a minute.
To talk to Mark, give him a call at 248-715-9222 or send him an email at mfight@iaggroup.com. AgDay, brought to you by Prosaro Fungicide from Bayer.
Welcome back to AgDay. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, there are quite a few fronts here on the weather map, but you know, what comes out of them, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's right. It took me a while to draw all these, but you're right. None of them are heavy, though, and that's the key. Or maybe I should have said strong, because they are putting down some decent rains, but it's all for short periods of time. The one area of low pressure in eastern Arkansas, some rain, as you can see, across Mississippi, parts of Alabama, western Tennessee, and Arkansas, and then the northeast system moving away. The next two fronts diving toward the southeast both have very little moisture with it, and the next storm off the west coast not really going to do too much as it's moving very slow. You can see as we head through the day today, the system in the southern portions of the country moves into the eastern Tennessee Valley, down into Georgia with some scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. Still some lingering rain in New England with that initial system. And then you can see these two fronts. I mean, the first front coming across the Great Lakes into the mid-Mississippi Valley just barely has any rain along it at all. In fact, some of you won't even see too many clouds as that front comes through. Next, cold front has nothing, a little bit of moisture though with the area of low pressure. Moving through the day tomorrow, then you can see that system that starts off in Arkansas now moving back into the northeast. So you folks have that first system and the second system coming through, but basically just very light areas of moisture across parts of the Great Lakes otherwise, and a little bit coming in out west with that system finally making it there. Precipitation over the past 24 hours, you can see most of it has been in the southern Mississippi Valley and the northeast. Adding in the next 36 hours, you can see how that system kind of loops its way through the southeastern parts of the country. And again, the moisture with these two systems coming in from the north just barely there, maybe a tenth, 15/100ths of an inch. Afternoon temperatures, you can see lots of 50s and 60s across most of the Midwest, 70s and 80s by the time you get to the Gulf Coast. So these are more typical numbers for this time of the year, unlike what we've seen for several weeks now. You can see low temperatures tonight, all above freezing through the midsections of the country, although just barely so in Sault Ste. Marie. 60s by the time you get to the Gulf of Mexico, and more of the same tomorrow. Lots of 50s and 60s through the heartland, 70s and 80s by the time you get into the southeast. A few 90s showing up in the southwest, though. Here's the jet stream. We still have a quick little shot of chillier air for the weekend, at least early in the weekend, for the Great Lakes from the northeast. And then the ridge comes back, and that will really bring the heat into places that haven't seen a whole lot of it. See a little bit of a cutoff there in the southwest by later next week. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Scottsbluff, Nebraska, a mixture of sunshine and clouds today, high temperature around 60. Bloomington, Illinois, partly sunny, very comfortable, high of 66. And Trenton, New Jersey, partly sunny today. It'll be pleasant with a high around 69 degrees.
How important is animal welfare outside the farming community? You might be surprised what other important issue it surpasses. And later, researchers in Louisiana are searching for ways to help keep pollinators healthy in the face of attack.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
In news from our partners over at Drovers, Americans say they care more about animal welfare than children's education and hunger. That's according to a new study conducted by the global communications firm Ketchum. The study, entitled Causes Americans Care About, gathered responses from 1,000 adults. 41% chose animal welfare as their #1 cause. Children's education ranked second with 38%. Hunger coming in third at 33% of respondents.
Last year's study found hunger was the #1 concern of Americans. The top 5 causes Americans care about this year is rounded out by disease research at #4 and disaster relief at #5. Environmental issues dropped by 10 points in the last year, from being rated as important by 34% of respondents in 2017 to 24% in 2018.
Breaking it down by age group, those 35 and older were more likely to identify animal welfare as a top cause, while young adults choose children's education. Eli Lilly and Company, the parent company of Elanco, may have found a suitor for their animal health business. Lilly announcing last year it would be willing to spin off their animal health sector to the right buyer. Well, according to Bloomberg, citing unnamed sources, 2 private equity firms have expressed some interest. Some analysts put the value of the Elanco division between $14 and $16 billion. Now, a spokesperson for Lilly said they do not comment on deal speculation, but they expect to have an update at mid-year when they release their second quarter financial results. From beef to bees, the battle against mites is helping keep pollinators busy. That story's next.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
The country has woken up in recent years to the importance of bees, bee health, and the crucial role they play in pollinating many of our agricultural crops. That said, mites remain a major concern for beekeepers. And as Craig Gautreaux of the LSU Ag Center reports, researchers there are looking for ways to help identify and fight these tiny pests.
Spring is the time of year for bees to be busy. Busy pollinating flowers and making sweet honey. But nationally, bees are experiencing a reduction in numbers, with the exact cause not yet known. One potential reason for their collapse could be diseases spread by mites.
The biggest concern we have, not just them losing their juices to these mites, but these mites can transmit a deformed wing virus. Doesn't let them fly anymore. So it can kill the bees really quickly because you no longer have bees that are able to forage for food.
It is important for beekeepers to monitor their colonies for any mite infestations, especially when the weather is cold.
So they can kill them, especially if you have really high mite numbers going into the winter season. Your bees are much less likely to overwinter successfully and actually can die off pretty quickly.
While bees are not a major crop pollinator in Louisiana when compared to other states such as California, they do serve as a pollinator for some fruit crops and provide opportunities for those who want to become beekeepers.
They do help a lot of local production, so if you have like local strawberries and other local berries, that helps. But a lot of people really enjoy keeping bees for the honey production and also to sell bees to other people who are interested in getting into beekeeping.
With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.